Let's get more on this now with Giorgio Cafiero, who's the CEO of Gulf State Analytics, a Washington, D.C.-based geopolitical risk consultancy. He joins us now from Monroe in Utah. Good to have you on the program, Giorgio. As we heard there, Ayatollah Khamenei's hardline protege and the judiciary chief, Ebrahim Raisi, is seen as the front runner. What will his leadership mean for Iran if he does win the election?
Well, in terms of Iran's image on the international level, I think that having Raisi as president could do quite a bit of damage. As I'm sure your viewers are aware, Raisi is a figure who has quite a bit of blood on his hands. We look back at the events of 2009, the events of 1988. He represents much of the oppression that has shaped the rule of the Islamic Republic ever since 1979. And I think, as I said, that's going to certainly undermine Iran's image, at least in the West.
I think many people still remember the scenes of jubilation in Iran when the 2015 nuclear deal was signed and sanctions were gradually eased. The deal, of course, fell apart when Donald Trump became US president, and the Iranian economy has suffered ever since. Do you see the agreement being resurrected at all under a new leadership in Iran?
Well, it's important to keep in mind that the decision maker in Tehran is the country's supreme leader and not the president. So while a Raisi administration could approach the negotiations in a manner which is a little different from how Rouhani's administration has done so, I think there's probably going to be less flexibility. Let's keep in mind that if the supreme leader wants Iran to continue the negotiations and to enter some sort of a JCPOA 2.0, if you will, that's going to go ahead regardless of the outcome of this election. And I will just say that in terms of foreign policy, for all the differences between Rouhani and Raisi, I think we can expect quite a bit of continuity in terms of how Iran approaches international issues. Probably when we begin looking at domestic issues in Iran, that's where a little bit more is at stake in terms of the outcome of this year's presidential election.
So, as we've heard through the reporting, there has been a low voter turnout. What happens if the turnout is found to be under 50%, which figures would suggest that would seem to be the case?
It tells us a lot about the times that we're in. Many Iranians are struggling with inflation, unemployment, other economic problems exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic. The effect of maximum pressure has been brutal. So many Iranians don't think that there is necessarily a reason to vote. There is a lot of despair among ordinary citizens of Iran. Many of them believe that this was much more of a selection rather than an election, which is a reasonable conclusion given how many of the candidates were disqualified. And I think it sends out a powerful message about how so many citizens think that it's better to simply avoid voting rather than to participate in the election. However, Iran is a complicated country, and I don't want to be dismissive of all the Iranians who do think that voting is the right thing to do. And there are many who are going out to vote for Raisi, for other candidates, and they also have their reasons for believing that this election is legitimate. And I certainly think their perspectives matter too. But as you said, this turnout is going to be very low. And I definitely tie that to widespread despair and frustration that millions of Iranians have been feeling for quite some time right now.
Okay, we'll have to leave it there. Giorgio Cafiero from Gulf State Analytics, thank you again for joining us on TRT World.